Muy buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a esta sección tan emocionante en la que vamos a hablar de la impresión 3D en medicina. Yo creo que todos hemos oído hablar de la impresión 3D, pero hoy vamos a ver verdaderamente cuál es el impacto que está teniendo a nivel internacional en los tratamientos de muchos pacientes. Y para ello tenemos un elenco de ponentes de lujo, algunos de los mejores y más pioneros profesionales en temas de impresión 3D a nivel global. Y no estoy exagerando, ¿vale? Ahora cuando veáis sus presentaciones y leáis sus biografías, lo vais a verificar. Su presencia aquí es un auténtico lujo, estamos muy agradecidos de tenerlos y al final demuestra un poco el impacto que estamos teniendo los ingenieros y la ingeniería en la medicina, ¿no? Si me dejáis un inciso para que les dé la bienvenida a nuestros ponentes internacionales en inglés. Welcome, the four of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your contribution to this Congress makes it very valuable, and we are really grateful and looking forward to listening to your presentations, and thank you for sharing also your knowledge with us. In the case of Amy, she's coming all the way from the United States to join us. Viene de Estados Unidos, de la Clínica Mayo, solamente para dar esta ponencia, así que thank you so much, Amy. Peter and Lawrence, they are coming from the UK, vienen de Reino Unido, del Hospital de Morriston. Y en el caso de Nieves, tenemos la suerte de tenerla en Madrid, siendo una referente global en temas de bioimpresión. Sin más dilación, voy a explicaros por qué son pioneros y referentes en impresión 3D y voy a empezar con sus biografías. Voy a empezar con Amy Alexander, de la Clínica Mayo de Estados Unidos. Amy es la jefa de la Unidad de Desarrollo Mecánico e Ingeniería Computacional Aplicada de la Clínica Mayo de Estados Unidos. Tiene un equipo de ingenieros a su cargo y su rol es el de materializar las ideas clínicas que tienen los médicos en el hospital en productos y en proyectos de ingeniería y apoyar las actividades de investigación e iniciativas educativas en todo lo relativo al 3D. Amy, thank you very much for joining us. Again, it's a luxury to have you, and the stage is all yours.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. My español no es bueno, so I will be speaking in English for most of the time. I'm ready for the slides to show, if now is a good time. I did my best to do some translating of some of the slides. Please don't hold me to this. I use Google Translate for some, but it should be all right. I'm going to show you a lot of images about what we work on at Mayo Clinic in the 3D medicine space, so there isn't a ton of language or words to read, and we'll go from there. So thank you, Alba. Thank you, Carmen, Berta, Nassim, all of you for your coordination and your planning efforts. I really appreciate it. Let's see, there we go. So I do have my biography in both English and Espanol. I am unit head of mechanical development and applied computational engineering at Mayo Clinic. It's a lot of words, but what does it mean? I have 21 engineers, designers, and technicians that report to me, and we work on medical device development. So we're constantly taking requests from physicians around the Mayo Clinic enterprise for ideas that they have for a new invention or a new way to solve a problem, a new system that we can invent, and we combine mechanical engineering, software engineering, and electrical engineering with all sorts of manufacturing techniques. I'm just going to skip the rest of my bio because you all can read. You don't need me to read it to you. Next, I did want to say that I have been to Spain before. I actually lived in Vigo in 1994 and 1995. I went to the Colegio Oficial in Galicia. Took a 45-minute bus ride up into the mountains every day with my little brother. I don't know if I have a pointer. That's all right. You can tell which one my brother is. We did very well at this school because it was an immersion school for Spanish-speaking children to learn English. So, most of the coursework was in English. The only class that I failed was lunch. Unfortunately, because I grew up on mac and cheese and hot dogs, if you know what those things are, I did not have the sophisticated palate that was ready for the Galician menu, and I just refused to eat at lunchtime. But everything else, mathematics, science, everything technical related, I did quite well. So anyway, a couple pictures of my time from Vigo, and I'm honored to be here to speak with all of you, and it makes this really special for me to come back to Spain. So thank you for taking the time to speak, or to listen to me speak, and hopefully we can get together after the panel or after the conference and talk a little bit more together. There we go. All right, so why are we all here? The biggest reason that we are all here is to combine and allow the connection between medicine and technology. Raise your hand if you're an engineer. Yeah? Keep your hand raised if you do 3D printing in medicine. Oh, good. Okay, so we have fewer people that do 3D printing. That makes sense. That makes it good so that you can get a little bit more out of my presentation. But what we're trying to do is connect physicians and proceduralists to the technology. At Mayo Clinic, we don't come up with the idea for a new medical device. That comes from our physician or research partners. So they have a workflow, they're moving through the process, and they figure, this part of the workflow is really cumbersome, and we would really like engineers to come and take a look at the system and see if there can be some streamlining that can be done. Maybe there's a mechanical device that can be fabricated, maybe there's a software as a medical device that needs to be created, developed, coded. It really depends on the situation, and I'm going to talk more about the division of engineering and what we do at Mayo Clinic. So one of the primary values, there are a couple that I'll go through throughout the presentation, but one of the primary values is that we excel in anything. If we excel, it's in our capacity to translate an idea into action, or the ideal situation into action. You can kind of read that as you wish, and I went ahead and translated that to my best ability. This was a quote from Dr. Charles H. Mayo. The Mayo Clinic was started by two brothers that lived in the state below Minnesota, Iowa, and they were called up to Rochester after a tornado hit the area and devastated the local population. And actually, the Catholic Sisters of St. Francis of Assisi were the ones who were writing to the Mayo brothers and saying, we have so many injured people, we have patients for you to take care of, please come up to Rochester and take care of our patients. And that's how it all really truly started. It was with Charles and William Mayo and their father, William Worrell Mayo. So the three of them together all started the Mayo Clinic. And we live by their essence, the primary goals and values that they really wanted to instill were that the needs of the patient should come first and all other needs are secondary. So today we're going to talk about four things mainly. We're going to talk about the fact that engineering at Mayo Clinic is not novel or new. It really started in 1915 with the development of an instrument shop. Then for all those years, the engineering division has been there building devices and creating software and creating electronics that are helping patients at Mayo Clinic. We're not a registered medical device manufacturer with the FDA because we do not market or sell our devices unless they are patented, and that patent is licensed out to a true registered medical device manufacturer, someone like Medtronic, Stryker, DePuy Synthes, etc. Then we're going to talk about we'll talk about the use of 3D printing at Mayo Clinic, starting in 2006 with a set of conjoined twins who shared a liver and a common bile duct, and I'll kind of walk through that case. And then we'll talk about the progression of the utilization of 3D medicine from anatomic modeling to anatomic surgical guides. And then finally, we'll talk about what's on the horizon for Mayo Clinic, which is on-demand, patient-specific implant fabrication in a titanium, aluminum, vanadium powder. So we'll talk about the history of the Division of Engineering from 1915, the establishment of anatomic models in 2006, the establishment of surgical guides in 2016, and then now the implant practice, which is starting up full force in 2025. Oh, in Spanish as well. Sorry about that. And each of these things kind of has icons to go along with them. I can't be a millennial and not use icons. It's just a required rule. So basically, the first step is connecting technology or connecting machining to physicians, and then the anatomic modeling came next, attaching the fabrication of surgical guides to, there we go, the patient's actual bedside. So in the operating room, utilizing things that are sterilized and cleaned and sterilized to a degree of biocompatibility that means the tools can be used in the operating room. And finally, doing every part of the process of surgical preparation through the 3D printing of implants at the hospital. I do have a slide with some of the references. There are so many references I could give you. The first one is my ResearchGate page, so 31 different papers on 3D printing in medicine that you can peruse. You can find different authors and check out their work as well through that. If anyone would like a copy of the slides, please reach out to Alba, or I will be putting my email address on the last slide and you can get that down and shoot me a note. Happy to share. Okay, so the instrument shop in the Division of Engineering, 1915. I do have a timer on, so I should be good so far on time. This is an example of one of the instruments. We'll call it an instrument. It's more of a medical device, right? A heart and lung machine was developed at Mayo Clinic in the 1950s and patented in 1954. Let me see that. 55. Yep. Mine cuts off a little bit at the top. Patented in 1955. So it was the first, perfusion machinery that was used in the world, and that kind of showcases that Mayo Clinic has been at the forefront of innovation and engineering at the point of care for many, many years. So let's talk a little bit more about 1915 and where we went from there. We do have a mission statement that matches what we're up to. So inspiring hope and promoting health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I promise that I'm not going to read what's on the slides because, again, you are all very intelligent people. You don't need me to read to you. This is a photo of 1952 in the instrument shop. So it had grown to about 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. Don't know what that is in meters, but you can do the math. And essentially it was all about making specialized needles and specialized hand tools for surgical procedures. It's grown from 1915 until today. We're over 100 years old, and we do a lot of things now. We do medical devices and instrumentation first and foremost. We help researchers prepare for their federally funded grant-sponsored research, in that we help with the methods section. They may have the idea for the type of research that they want to do, but they may not know exactly what devices or instrumentation they need to have that done. There are a number of other things there, but I said it all in Spanish or in English, so you can just go back. If you need to take a screenshot of this or an image of this, you certainly can. I talked about device development, I talked about clinical trial support, and then how do we actually make sure that patients who are not in the Mayo Clinic ecosystem get access to the devices that we develop? Well, that's through our for-profit entity called Mayo Clinic Ventures, and Mayo Clinic Ventures will do all of the legwork to get something patented, and then they can license out that patent to a larger medical device manufacturer. So we're not keeping all of our inventions inside only Mayo Clinic. We want to share the wealth. We want to get those patents out there so people know what the ideas are, and then license those out to major players who can do mass manufacturing. The Division of Engineering does not do mass manufacturing. We're talking a max N of maybe 25 of a particular device. If we need to mass manufacture something, we partner with an MCO, manufacturing contracting organization. We work with anyone within the Mayo Clinic network, within the enterprise. So Mayo Clinic has 3 major sites in the US, one in Minnesota, one in Florida, and one in Arizona, as well as a number of sites in the tri-state area around the Rochester, Minnesota region. We typically have requests from physicians or researchers, like I mentioned. So we're not sitting in a basement alone coming up with ideas for new devices. That doesn't make any sense because we're not the ones conducting the practice. We need to listen to the physicians who are in the operating room, and that connection between engineer and physician is like gold. It is so important because a lot of device companies, they come up with their own ideas for a new way that something can be done, but then they try to pitch it to a physician, and the messaging behind that is, hey, I know what you do, I don't actually know how to do it, but here's a way that you can do it better. That's a little frustrating, I think, for a physician to hear, especially one who's dedicated many, many years of their life perfecting a specific procedure. They don't want to hear that some random engineer in a basement somewhere came up with a better way of doing it. What they want to do is come up with the idea themselves and then share it with us so that we can make that happen. This is a snapshot of the organizational structure of the Division of Engineering. You don't need to know any of the names of these people, but basically we are a 3-section organization. We have a mechanical section, an electrical section, a software section, and technically a portfolio management section. I keep hitting the wrong button, sorry guys. Spanish again. I think this is gonna work, right? So the Organización Técnica is made up of 3 major sections here. I kind of mentioned them, but we have the biomechanical shop where we have major manufacturing, traditional manufacturing equipment, CNC mills, lathes, vacuum formers, laser engravers, anything that you can think of that you would find in a traditional job shop, you're going to find in our biomechanical shop. And then the two areas that I support are mechanical development and applied computational engineering. So applied computational engineering are things like FEA, finite element analysis, CFD, computational flow dynamics, field-driven analysis that we can do to anticipate what our electrodes are going to stimulate in a specific tissue type, etc. Then we have electrical and software engineering, including a big push for our engineers to become well-versed in all things artificial intelligence and machine learning, any kind of deep learning that we can apply to software programs that we write and or data that's already been acquired by our researchers to give them better insights, kind of like a simplified pivot table in Excel. And then finally, we have a portfolio management office that has engineers who are also project managers, so they understand things like scope, schedule, and budget. They help the engineers stay on track in terms of spending money, spending time, which is our most precious resource, and staying within the scope of what we agreed to do. You can imagine that physicians come to us with a small idea, and that kind of grows and grows and grows and grows and snowballs into something that is much more grand. So in order for us to be successful and more importantly have quantitative metrics on that success, we need to make sure that we stick within that original scope for each project. And then if they want to, they can submit the next request, and we can take a look at that and prioritize that and see if it makes sense for us to work on it. So we have mechanical engineers, biomedical engineers, chemical engineering, electrical engineers, software, and AI. Aerospace engineers, because we do specialize in aerospace medicine as well. Computer and hardware engineers, a quality engineer to handle the maintenance and improvement of our quality management system, which is compatible with the FDA's 21 CFR Part 820 quality system regulation for medical device development, and it's also a current good manufacturing practice guidebook. And then we have safety engineers, project management engineers, as I mentioned, as well as technicians of all kinds. We have a materials coordinator who does all of our purchasing, and then finally the administration and engineering management. So there are 9 managers covering about 70 different employees to make sure that they have the tools that they need. It's most important to us that we give them the resources that they ask for, whether that be time, space, equipment, staffing, materials, and then we get out of the way and let them do the things that they're going to do. All right, next subsection, anatomic modeling. Who's familiar with the concept of anatomic modeling? Raise your hand. Hey, all right, so this is good. We are going to talk about how we go from, I saw you, we go from radiological data to physical replicas of patients' anatomy. I'm not going to show the process itself. I'm just going to focus on the output of that process. So las necesidades del paciente son lo primero. The needs of the patient come first. You can see why I'm not giving this talk in Spanish, right? But the needs of the patient come first. We're always putting the needs of the patient first. And so we're not always thinking about commercialization of the device at the beginning. However, that does kind of weave in as a thread in our thought process in terms of intellectual property protection. But we're always thinking about the patient. And so this started with anatomic modeling and 3D printing in 2006. This is Abigail and Isabel. They share a liver and a chest wall, as you can see. How are we going to prepare for their surgery that is going to take about 60 different people in the operating room and over 24 hours of surgical procedure time? Well, it was a thought that came to a pediatric radiologist in the pink sweater in the back there. That's Dr. Jane Matsumoto. She is the pioneer of medical 3D printing in the United States. She hired me into the practice in 2015, so I didn't even start until 2015 in terms of actual anatomic modeling. But she was there in 2006, and they CT scanned the patients to get volumetric imaging that was of high enough quality to create then a 3D anatomic model. So a liver model was made of their shared organ, and then the common bile duct was subtracted. You can tell that this is a rudimentary 3D print because you can see layer lines in that liver very heavily. This was a vat photopolymerization print, so it's a resin-based feedstock, a photopolymer that is cured or hardened with UV light as it builds. It was built in the Twin Cities area, which is like the Minneapolis area, 90 miles from Rochester. Also, we have an incredible medical illustration team who worked alongside the radiologist and the surgeon to prepare additional media. So this is a multimedia preparation and effort. They also created a medical illustration that really shows the liver that was shared between the twins and the common bile duct. So here you can see Dr. Christopher Moyer kind of holding and pointing to the liver. He was the lead pediatric surgeon that separated the twins at this time. Separating conjoined twins using 3D printing as medical aids is not a new thing, and we were not the first to do it. I'm just telling you about the first time we did it at Mayo Clinic. You can see how useful it is for him to talk about where he's going to separate that liver and give twin A this section and twin B these lobes, and then who's going to get the prosthetic common bile duct, because they only had one and they were sharing it prior to the procedure. The procedure was very successful. Abby and Isabel are now 18 years old. You would never know that these two people went through a separation of chest wall and liver at the time. They've actually been back to visit us in the anatomic modeling lab, and we put them to work doing all sorts of 3D print post-processing. And so that was kind of a neat event for me to see, wow, this has come full circle. We did one model in 2006, and then now in maybe 2018, we were doing hundreds of anatomic models per year. A technical consideration for anatomic modeling, just a brief intro. So modeling of anatomy must come from high quality and high resolution, low signal to noise, and thin slice radiological data. it's important that that data and the protocols that run the machines are developed specifically to make the data as high quality and high fidelity as possible so that we can accurately represent the anatomy in a 3D print. This just shows some dual energy and some iterative metal artifact removal, IMR, of pedicle screw that's screwed into a vertebrae. You can see in image A, there's all sorts of noise and scatter and haloing effect around the screw, and then as it goes through post-processing of the imaging, in image A plus B plus C, and the furthest on the right, you can see it's much more clear. And so that's just a nod to the complexities of the imaging that are needed for anatomic modeling. Everything that I'm going to talk about from here on out is all about using the imaging and applying it to solve the problem of better surgical planning and better surgical execution. So I'm spending a little time on these two slides because the radiological imaging is so important. In Mayo Clinic, anatomic modeling is rooted in the Department of Radiology. That's not the case everywhere. Sometimes it's rooted in surgery, and we'll hear from Morriston and see maybe where their lab is rooted. But because everything starts from radiology and the radiologists have the ability to better create protocols for imaging acquisition, it needs to start there. Here on the left-hand side, you can see that's without dual energy CT scanning and without iterative metal artifact reduction. And on the right-hand side, you can see it with, and this is just a literal metal filling from a patient. This is in maybe half of the population, especially the older generations. They have metal fillings, and that can totally, absolutely obscure the imaging that you need to get in order to do, say, a mandible reconstruction, which we will talk about. So here are a couple of examples of anatomic models. My specialty when I worked in the anatomic modeling lab for 6 years was craniomaxillofacial reconstruction. So we've got a couple of people with that specialty here, and I think it's because it is so deeply important when people have a facial trauma or facial cancer, or for some reason a bone in their face has been removed. It's so deeply important to make sure that when we reconstruct, we're thinking of symmetry. The face is the window to the soul. If I was missing my left or my right pinky, none of you would know, even though I'm standing up here staring at you and talking to you. But if my eye on the left side was drooping down here, it's probably all you could think about, and that's just human nature. We're hardwired to look at faces, and so craniofacial reconstruction and the precision that it requires is a very important piece of anatomic modeling in 3D medicine. There are a couple of other examples of anatomic models. I'm going to breeze through because I'm talking too much. Please go ahead and reach out if you'd like these slides. A couple more examples. The one on the left is a reconstruction of the pelvic iliac near the sacrum with a fibula reconstruction, and the one on the right is showing how you can choose different organs or different sections of organs, parts of anatomy to show or hide. So the middle liver has the parenchyma, the one on the right is missing the parenchyma, so you can see the relationship between the ureters, the veins, and the arteries. You can very easily see how important anatomic modeling can be for surgical planning. We also do a lot of wall thickness analysis for plastics reconstruction, and when people hear plastic surgery, oftentimes they think of, cosmetic plastic surgery, but plastics at Mayo is really all about trauma or cancer and reconstruction. It also, we've gotten into gender verification surgery as well. So sometimes the procedure requires the reduction of a certain facet of the face, and it's very important that we know how thick the wall is at that location. Anatomic models also can give us scale. So this is a chest wall of an infant, but you wouldn't know that if I didn't have a picture of the hand in the image, right? The hand gives you immediate understanding of scale. There's so much more I could talk about with anatomic modeling, but we gotta move on. Surgical guides. Well, this is, in 2016, we really brought 3D printing to the patient's bedside and to the procedural room. The next section and until the end will have some surgical photos, so feel free to excuse yourself if you're not interested in seeing surgical photos. I did, at Alba's recommendation, make all of the images black and white, so they're not that bad to me. All right, so we're talking about precision cutting, precision osteotomy, precision reconstruction. This has also been translated into Spanish. Hopefully it's close enough. But essentially it starts with an order from the surgeon. The surgeon says, I know that I'm going to have to take out a section of the jaw, for example, because there's osteomyelitis or an ameloblastoma or a different type of tumor there. And then the order, I'm going to walk through each of these steps very briefly. The surgical consult takes place and they decide that anatomic modeling and surgical guides are going to be helpful in the reconstruction. That's steps 1 and 2. Steps 3 and 4 are really to order the imaging, order the surgery, and order the imaging acquisition so that it aligns with the protocols that we've developed for anatomic modeling. This is a snapshot of the EPIC order. So EPIC is our EMR at Mayo Clinic. The EPIC order was developed by radiology, so it's in the Radiant module, and it's listed as a consultation and not a procedure, because we as engineers are not meeting with the patient and doing things on the patient. We are doing prep work with the surgeon shoulder to shoulder to make sure that they're best prepared to carry out or execute the plan that they've created digitally. Just another screenshot of the order. We ask the surgeon to tell us, is this bilateral, or are you asking for something on the left or the right? Are you looking for something that can be used as surgical rehearsal, or are you looking for something that you can use for educational purposes to show the patient, show the family, or show your team, like Dr. Chris Moyer did with the conjoined twins? Then the segmentation occurs. We'll kind of gloss over that. There's so much we could talk about, but essentially you're collecting the pixels that represent the maxilla, the pixels that are the voxels, three-dimensional pixels that represent the mandible, and then you're creating parts from those selected voxels and creating three-dimensional meshes from that. I do need to talk about this. So then the virtual surgical planning takes place, and that is when the surgeon comes in and places their osteotomies as close to the tumor as possible, but far enough away that they're confident that they'll have negative margins when they do the procedure. One thing that's unique about Mayo Clinic is that we have frozen section laboratories that are adjacent to the procedural rooms, the operating rooms, and the specimen, once it's removed, it will be taken directly to the frozen section lab and immediately tested for those cancer cells or for whatever cells that are causing the patient the issue. And then the frozen section lab technicians, the pathologists, will page the operating room and say, all right, Dr. Skinner, you've removed the extent of the tumor, we have negative margins. And so then the physician, once they have that notice, they can go ahead and complete the reconstruction. This is a 3D printing of surgical guides. We do have controls in place. We do clean and sterilize the guides in accordance with ISO 10993. I can talk about that all day, but I'm not going to. Let's move on to the actual procedure. So they've sterilized the guides. They're using them to affix them to the patient's bone and guide the surgical saws through, remove the section of damaged tissue, and then if it's a fibula reconstruction, for example, which in this case is, we also make a guide for that fibula section so that you have a completely perfect, almost like carpentry reconstruction of the jaw, and it's completely symmetrical. And I know my colleagues up here are going to speak about this a little bit, so I'm not going to talk too much, but I do want to focus on the fact that the implants here is a 3D printed custom or patient matched. The FDA prefers we say patient matched because custom device is a different area. So we say patient matched device. We also have a national 3D printing registry. It says it's called national because it's hosted by the National Registry and Data something, NRDR. But anyone worldwide can be a member of this 3D printing registry, and it really helps us to capture how many procedures are being done in the hospital. Are the CPT codes that are available being used? What types of procedures are we using 3D printing to help with? what types of applications. Is it just an anatomic model? Are we doing surgical guides, or are we doing 3D printed implants, etc.? So shout out to the registry folks. Please join the registry if you're doing 3D printing in medicine. It's about $500 US a year to contribute, but it means a lot as we move toward reimbursement that is a permanent Category 1 CPT code set. So that's what we're working on. And finally, 3D printed implants is where we are going. We have spent the last 4 years preparing the quality management system and the documentation required in order for us to 3D print titanium implants that are patient matched directly at the point of care on demand. So finally, we brought the entire workflow of surgical preparation into the hospital section. We do not outsource, or we plan not to outsource 3D printed implants that are patient matched in the future. We do outsource them now. Why do we take it on in-house? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Precision care is the first thing. Time efficiency is the second, and there's a third one that I'll go through. We're leveraging expertise of so many different groups, and that's an important thing to note when you think about 3D printing in a hospital. It's really not supposed to be one person in a secret basement lab with a 3D printer just doing whatever they want. It has to be a collaborative approach. And like I said before, the engineers don't come up with the device ideas at Mayo Clinic. We listen to our physician partners and our researchers on what they need, and then we connect them to the technology, which again is why we're all here today. So the current process, everything in blue is done in-house at Mayo Clinic, except for the implant design and implant manufacturing in white. But we want to get to the point where it's all blue all the way down the line. So I'm going to very quickly move through a patient case. You've seen this idea or example already. There's a patient who has a tumor. We design and 3D print surgical guides to help reconstruct the jaw. Then in our future state, we have a technician and designer and engineer team that is going to design the implant and then 3D print, post-process, continue to post-process with smoothing, buffing. There's annealing involved. There's wire EDM to cut it off the build plate. I mean, I'm going in the reverse order, but that doesn't matter because most of you don't know about the process I'm talking about. But anyway, we print the model, or we print the implant, we post-process the implant, we passivate the implant, and then we send it off to the surgical core to clean and sterilize, and that is the entire process. So here is all the Mayo Clinic manufacturing steps. We manufacture the surgical guides and we manufacture the implant. That is our goal for 2025. Just highlighting the implants here. I am over time. This is our future state where we're doing everything from anatomic model to surgical guide to implant. And then I have a number of quotes here from physicians. Why are we doing this? Because it's prompt, precise, and it has an element of patient care that we don't find if we use a third-party vendor at this time. If we were to order a patient-matched implant for a humerus, for example, we've seen lead times of 14 to 18 months. That patient wanted to amputate her arm because she was in so much pain and she needed this implant, and it was super important that we were able to get her an implant. Unfortunately, it took 18 months. She was willing to wait it out, but that shouldn't happen. We can and will get these implants to these patients in a lot less time. So I have a couple of references here, things that were shown on the slides. I don't want to take credit for other people's work in terms of images, so all of the image references are here. I also have my ResearchGate profile here and here, and I encourage all of you, if you're not already doing 3D printing, to look into it. Think about ways that your hospital or your company can leverage this rapid prototyping technology. And with that, let's get to work. Thank you very much.
Bueno, absolutamente impresionante la cantidad de recursos que tiene la Clínica Mayo y el ejército de ingenieros que tiene la Clínica Mayo, ¿no? A ver si poco a poco pues vamos siguiendo un poquito esos pasos y bueno, y aprendemos, ¿no? de eso. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much. Very good Spanish, by the way. Very good pronunciation.
It's embarrassing.
Not at all, not at all. Ok. Bueno, vamos a continuar con nuestros siguientes ponentes. Son Peter Evans y Lawrence Dovgalski del Hospital Morrison en Reino Unido. Bueno, Peter y Lawrence son protésicos maxilofaciales, que es una profesión que tiene bueno, una formación propia dentro del sistema de salud pública del Reino Unido. Aquí los llamamos anaplastólogos. Nosotros en España no tenemos esa formación que tienen ellos en Reino Unido y se les llama como científicos reconstructivos y se forman para hacer prótesis faciales. Ellos os lo van a explicar muy bien. Peter es el gerente del laboratorio maxilofacial del Hospital de Morrison. Solo lleva 37 años haciendo prótesis de cara. Y Lawrence es pues, parte de su equipo de laboratorio y lleva 18 años de experiencia también en el laboratorio haciendo desarrollos de productos maxilofaciales. Y bueno, están aquí y para mí es muy importante que estén aquí en este hospital, en este congreso. Yo considero que son uno de los grandes pioneros a nivel global en temas de impresión 3D. El primer biomodelo en 3D que usaron en el hospital lo hizo una empresa, pero ya introdujeron el concepto del 3D en el hospital fue hace 34 años. ¿Vale? Imaginaros. Y fue el primer hospital en Reino Unido, y prácticamente yo diría que en Europa, en contratar ingenieros para impresión 3D, que lo hicieron ya hace como 10 años. Y para mí, bueno, los primeros en certificarse, etc. Y para mí es muy especial tenerlos aquí porque a mí me contrataron como ingeniera de 3D y estuve trabajando con ellos hace bueno, 7 años ya. Y bueno, yo recuerdo que hacíamos implantes personalizados prácticamente todas las semanas, ¿no? Hace ya pues 7 años. Entonces son para mí verdaderos pioneros, un ejemplo a seguir y bueno, es increíble tenerlos aquí. Thank you so much for coming. I was just saying that we used to work together and it was incredible to see all the amazing things that you do in Morrison Hospital. Truly pioneers in the world in this field, and we can't wait to listen to everything you have to present, so the stage is all yours.
Buenas tardes. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Alba, for the invitation, and to the organising committee for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. I'm going to talk a little bit about our unit and the timescale and how we've achieved things, and then my colleague Lawrence is going to really talk about what we're doing now and what the future is. So this is Morrison Hospital in Wales, in Gales. We're a 760-bed unit, first established in 1941. We're the second trauma centre for Wales and the first cardiac centre, and we also have the CLES Centre for Wales with us. We also have the specialist burns and plastics centre, and of course our specialty is maxillofacial, and our unit, which is around about 22 staff, is just based just behind the main unit there. So, maxillofacial surgery, we have 3 cancer surgeons who are dealing with our neoplastic disease. We have 2 craniofacial surgeons dealing with our congenital defects. We have our CLES surgeon and 2 restorative dentists who are dealing with trauma, with cancer, and with oral disease. And then lastly, we have our orthodontic consultants who are dealing with our CLES children and their orthodontic problems, and also any complex orthodontic cases that come through to the hospital. But for the maxillofacial laboratory where we are, we're dealing with the majority of the hospital. So we're dealing with ENT, with plastics, burn surgery, with occupational therapy, with orthopedics, cardiothoracic, lymphedema services, and rehab engineering. Rehab engineering is our wheelchair and seating service. Our training is very different. There's only around about 120 reconstructive scientists in the UK, so we're quite rare. It's a 6-year training program, and we have a clinical role. We're working directly on patients, and we have a technical role, as you can see there in the lower image. So we have a digital role as well. And we're doing realistic prostheses, intraoral prosthetics, extraoral splints and guides, and then we're also designing and outsourcing manufacture for deep buried implants such as titanium skull plates. So our service is free. So it's free to all the whole hospital. In fact, the whole of South Wales can access our services. So, and it's a walk-in access to surgeons, and that's very important. And I think as Amy was intimating, that really surgeons need to be able to come to you with their problems, and if they've got an idea or they've got a case that they're planning. They have very little time between surgery and clinic, so we literally have a walk-in service where they walk into the department and can sit down with us at any time. And I think as Amy was saying, really with innovation, when they come to you with an idea, that is like a little baby to them. It's a very delicate thing, and we never turn anybody away. However that crazy that idea may seem at the time, if you turn them away, they'll never come back again. So we try to say no, and we try to develop those ideas. As far as we manufacture, very similar to Amy, we manufacture as much as we can in-house, all of our surgery guides and prostheses. But all of our deep buried implants, our skull plates, our titanium plates, a private company, because really for us the purchase of a machine is around about €250,000 plus the infrastructure you need around that, and we just don't do enough cases really at this current time. So what do we do? So for class 1 devices, such as we make facial prostheses, we also make body and breast prostheses, and we do a lot of digits, fingers. Class 2 devices, we make burn splints, we make keloid splints for ears, and also devices to obturate septal defects from cocaine abuse or from trauma. And lastly, and the most serious area, is that we make, design and manufacture implants for the orbital floor, the cranioplasties, and we also manufacture surgical guides to guide our surgeons for the placement of implants. So we started this in 1990, and Adrian Sugar, the gentleman on the left there, he really pioneered this, and he drove the use of digital technology within our department, and we wouldn't be where we are today without his influence. And this is one of our very first digital cases. So this is, I think it was 1992. There was no 3D printing then, so this is a foam milled model. It cost approximately €1,500. But it was very useful in planning this case of hyperatrophy. It was very useful in trying to plan complex surgery. And that's really what drove us forward down the digital route. Shortly afterwards, we started collaborating with the local university, Cardiff Metropolitan University in Cardiff, which is about an hour away from us. And we met Richard Bibb, who's now at Sheffield, and subsequently Dominic Egbeer, And we worked with them for many years, and they really have helped us develop a lot of the techniques and software that we've got. That shows how long we've been doing it, because that middle image is me with dark hair. So it just shows how long we've been using haptic feedback devices. But a lot of the work we've done with Richard and with Dominic ended up in this publication. It's now in its third publication of this book on medical modelling. So when we first started, we didn't really want digital technology to replace everything that we did. And so this is this plate that you see here is not 3D printed, this is pressed. So this is handmade by swaging and pressing a sheet of titanium. So we used digital technology initially to get the shape that we wanted, but that plate there is really done by craftsmanship. And in those early days, we didn't really want to replace everything with craftsmanship out of the window. Today, I think our environment is half digital and still half manual. We have several 3D printers. We haven't invested in large format 3D printers because they're very expensive, and actually we can do the majority of our work on these small Formlabs type printers, and we can buy them in new when we need them. So what we have invested in is software, because you can get things printed anywhere, but software you need to design something, and it's really all about design and manufacture. And what we're trying to do is do better than you can see those commercial companies that are available to clinicians. Well, we're trying to provide something that's point of care, so that our surgeons can come to us at any point and we can produce and turn around a case very, very quickly and very, very efficiently, more than can be done commercially. So this was our first little bit of fame. This case did go around the world, and Lawrence will talk a little bit more about this case. So this was a young man who had a road traffic accident. His face had to be repaired very quickly at the time, just after the accident, to save his sight in that eye. But then we subsequently went back in and really used everything that we'd learned, when was this, 2013, to reconstruct the face as accurately as possible. And this is the technical and surgical team that you can see on the bottom there. But we soon found really that, I mean, Lawrence and myself were running between the clinic. We were trying to do clinical work, we were trying to do technical work, and we were trying to do digital work, and you can't really do that. You don't get anywhere because you don't do anything really well. So we decided to create the post for the 3D medical post in the UK, first 3D biomedical engineer. And that first person was Heather Guthrum. She had a background in forensics, and then we were very, very fortunate to attract Alba to us, and did amazing things with us. And then subsequently we've had Naomi, and our latest 3D designer is Alicia, who's with us at the moment. And so I think this is similar to the earlier case. Really, these are cases that we get through on a daily basis. Actually, I think we've had two this week. So but because they're cancer cases, you're trying to do a very quick and fast turnaround for our surgeons. So this is a aminoblastoma, and this lady again was in the press in 2017. I think this is a regular case. Back in 2017, this was the first time we'd really done this. And I don't know if our technical guy can just run the video a little bit.
Perdona, técnico, ¿me puedes poner el vídeo?
There we go. Do it halfway through?
Por la mitad, ¿lo puedes pasar un poquito, por favor? Por la mitad, ¿lo puedes poner el vídeo?
Yeah. I don't think I have time to run all of it. So this is our surgical guide in place, very similar to as Amy was showing you earlier. And so this is the guide is on the fibular bone, and it is really carpentry. We're trying to cut a piece of bone to fit exactly into the jaw. So once that's been harvested, and it's very important to get the blood supply to that piece of bone and soft tissue that's coming with it, then it can then be taken up. We put the plate on there. You can see the 3D printed plate. And the interesting thing about this case was that we designed it so that we kept the lady's facial contour. As you can see her in the middle there, she kept her facial symmetry even after the surgery. There you can see the plate in place. So that in 2017, that was very new, but as I say, today, that's very much run-of-the-mill for us. Another first for us was to do the 3D printed ribs. Again, this was because we offer an open and free service that the surgeons were able to come to us and say, is this something you can do? We spent a lot of time discussing, and Lawrence will go into a little bit more detail on this case, but this was the first, I think, you worked with us on this?
The previous one.
Yeah, the previous one. Yeah. So we've done, I think, 5 of these now, but this was the first 3D printed ribs that were printed, designed and created and fitted in the UK. And I think our last achievement, it always seems a bit boring really, which is quality management systems. But it's very important when you're working in this environment to have a quality management system when you're producing something that's going to be fitted, especially inside the body. And of course, European regulations mean now that we have to have ISO 13485. It took us about 2 years to put in place, but we finally did achieve it. We were lucky that we started to do it over COVID, so we managed to get all the paperwork and everything in place, but we've now had our three-year, we've had this now for 3 years, and it's working well. And it means that we have a certification to design and manufacture within our laboratory. So really that's where we've come from. We're at a time now where we've moved away from this type of pressed and crafted plate. I would argue really that there is still craft and knowledge in designing and manufacturing a 3D printed plate. That knowledge and skill hasn't gone. It's just done in a different way, and that's really where we are today. Okay, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lawrence.
Good afternoon, buenos tardes a todos. That's about as far as my Spanish goes, I'm afraid, so please bear with me. As Peter kindly said, my name's Lawrence Dogowski. I'm one of the senior maxillofacial prosthetists at Morriston Hospital, and I'd like to show us a few of our case examples from cases involving digital reconstruction. I'd like you all to please be aware that the following slides do contain some pretty graphic images of surgical procedures and patients with quite substantial facial defects. So I'd really kindly request that if you could avoid taking photographs or video, that would be great, because I'd like to help to try and preserve the dignity of the people who've very kindly given their images to be used. Thank you very much. The first case I'd like to highlight is a 3D reconstruction of an orbital floor defect. The insertion of titanium plates for reconstruction of orbital floor defects can prove very challenging for the surgical team. The incisions and dissection required to access the site must be kept very conservative in order to avoid damaging the very delicate soft tissue anatomy of the orbit. And this often results in a very, very poor field of view for the surgical team. And very restricted access for plate insertion. The patient highlighted in this example presented a very challenging scenario. as a result not only of the defect encompassing most of the orbital floor and medial wall, but also as a result of the patient having undergone previous surgery for reconstruction of the orbital rim. And you can see in the image to the right there that there's a reconstruction plate already in place there. So pretty much any off-the-shelf reconstruction plate wouldn't be suitable to reconstruct this case, as a result of the retentive tabs being in completely the wrong position for ideal placement. It was therefore decided to go with the custom design. Custom designs allow for far greater flexibility. In this case, our surgeons requested interlocking lugs in order to ensure that the two separate parts of the plate could be accurately located. It was determined that the plate would need to be in two parts in order to facilitate insertion while still being large enough to maintain coverage of the entire of the patient's defect. And while the manufacture of two-part plates is technically possible using traditional lab techniques, digital design makes the provision of interlocking features far more straightforward. As we currently have no facility to print in titanium within the hospital, the designs were sent to a third-party manufacturer for production. A post-operative X-ray was taken to ensure that the plates were accurately positioned. And as you can see in the image to the left here, both plates are sitting in the correct position and the interlocking segments are nicely engaged, which is producing a very smoothly contoured orbital floor. Once again, many thanks to Alba, who was instrumental in getting this case published, and this was actually published as a technical note in the British Journal of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery, so thank you very much for your hard work on that one. The next case I'd like to highlight is comminuted facial trauma. High energy impacts, such as those sustained through road traffic incidents, interpersonal violence, and industrial accidents, often lead to highly comminuted fractures of the facial skeleton. These complex trauma cases, reconstruction can prove very, very challenging due to this displacement of many very small bony fragments, which you can see here on the left. Correctly positioning these fragments is vital in order to restore the patient's facial contours and in obtaining a highly aesthetic reconstructive result. Thresholding the patient's post-operative scans can provide the surgical team with a very clear understanding of the misplaced anatomy before they even make a single cut in the operating room. But to further assist the surgical team, the preoperative scans can be reconstructed virtually. Once again, mentioning before that we work very closely with the surgeon, so only once a treatment plan has been approved by the maxillofacial consultant, a stereolithographic model can then be produced as a guide for the laboratory team to pre-bend all of the reconstruction plates prior to the operative procedure. In these very complex trauma cases, we have an old adage in the UK that forewarned is forearmed, and that's never been truer. Providing models, images, and pre-bent reconstruction plates can really help towards achieving a gold standard reconstruction outcome. It massively reduces the amount of guesswork that's required in the operating theatre and really cuts down the operating time massively. You can see in this case that actually the fractures of the frontal region have resulted in very, very tiny fragments of bone, which would be almost impossible to reconstruct in the theatre with mini plates alone. And so in this case, we've actually pre-bent a titanium reconstruction mesh, which the surgeon has then actually reinforced with a further mini plates once that's been positioned. Another nice little feature is that you can see on the right there that the tooth roots have been marked on this stereolithographic model, so when the laboratory team were pre-bending the plates, we could make sure that the retentive holes for the mini plates and the screws that would be involved in holding them in position wouldn't interfere with the roots of the teeth. The reconstruction plates translated very closely from the pre-planned positions to the final surgical outcome. The patient's post-operative CT scan shows a really satisfactory reconstruction. And note that once, amazingly in this case, despite the significant bony damage, there was very little in the way of soft tissue damage. So the patient actually ended up with a very, very aesthetic reconstructive outcome with very little in the need for plastic reconstruction of the soft tissues. The second trauma case I'd like to highlight is the case that Peter mentioned earlier on in his slide. This patient was involved in a motorcycle accident, so a road traffic collision. And the patient underwent immediate surgical reconstruction, but unfortunately, due to the complexity of positioning the various comminuted fractures in 3D space, the reconstruction was less than favourable. And following his operation, the patient complained of a flattening of his cheek. The decision was made to re-osteotomise the zygoma and maxillary buttress using a custom cutting guide. It was determined that alongside the cutting guide, a positioning guide would be required to accurately relocate the free-moving segments, along with reconstruction plates for both the zygoma and the orbital floor. The cutting guide was designed to fit the patient's anatomy with all undercut removed to facilitate intraoperative positioning. The positioning guide for the osteotomized bone fragments was also designed to facilitate location of both the orbital floor plate and the zygoma reconstruction plates. The delicate skeletal design of the complex guide necessitated manufacturing laser-sintered surgical-grade stainless steel. Most of the materials we would use to design something like this within the laboratory would simply end up being far too delicate. Both the implants were manufactured in surgical-grade titanium. The cut-out sections in the positioning guide allowed for accurate positioning of the reconstruction plates while allowing a small margin of manipulation intraoperatively. And I'd like to highlight that in this case, it is said that everyone experiences 15 minutes of fame in their lifetime, and we experience firsthand how daunting that can actually feel. The translation of a complex surgical plan to the operating theatre can be quite a tense experience at the best of times. But for this particular case, representatives from the national media got wind of this case, and they were actually present in the operating theatre as the plan was unfolding, so we had a full film crew in the theatre. So it was a little daunting, to say the least. So as Peter mentioned earlier on, although our main role is to support the maxillofacial surgical team, the remit of the maxillofacial laboratory extends beyond reconstruction of the head and neck region. This patient was under the care of the cardiothoracic team and presented with a large tumour within the chest cavity, involving 3 ribs and encroaching onto the sternum. It was determined that in order to successfully resect the tumour, a wide excision margin of 2 centimetres beyond the extent of the tumour mass would be required. And this would leave the patient with a substantial defect, which would prove very difficult, if not impossible, to reconstruct using off-the-shelf solutions. And therefore, the decision was made to design a custom titanium implant. The implant was modelled in Octon freeform software, and the anatomy of the unaffected side was utilised to produce a design that closely mimicked the contour of the region to be resected. Holes were incorporated into the sternum section to improve drainage and to reduce the weight of the implant. And in order for the device to be evaluated by the surgical team, a prototype version was produced in-house using a Formlabs Form 2 stereolithographic printer. There's actually a funny little story that goes along with that, which I don't have time to tell now, but if anyone wants to ask afterwards, feel free. The final implant was manufactured from surgical-grade titanium by means of a metal-powered bed fusion. The surgery was very highly successful, with the implant accurately conforming to the patient's anatomy. In order to allow the patient to breathe comfortably, the implant was secured in place not using the regular surgical screws, but using Ethibond sutures, which allowed the implant a degree of flexibility, allowing the chest to move. Facial defects with communication into the oral cavity provide the maxillofacial team with some of the most challenging prosthetic reconstructions. Loss of maxillary bone presents a threefold problem. Firstly, a loss of retentive surface for intraoral prosthetics. Secondly, direct access for saliva and food debris to escape from the mouth towards the orbital or nasal cavity. And thirdly, a profound detrimental impact on speech. The lack of bone for retention necessitates the use of implants external to the oral cavity, with fixtures ordinarily reserved solely for the retention of facial prosthetics being used to facilitate intraoral reconstruction as well. In order to achieve this, frameworks must be designed to provide lateral anchorage for facial prosthetics, whilst also supporting magnetic retention components for intraoral devices. Manufacture of these devices by means of analog laboratory techniques is complex and time-consuming and often requires the framework to be constructed in several stages. employing the use of lost wax casting, careful soldering, and adhesion of acrylic retentive components. And I worked it out, and fabrication of one of these frameworks would typically use enough gold bar to treat 6 or 7 of our ear prosthetic patients. So there are quite a lot of materials going into the fabrication of these. Translating the design workflow from analog to digital has shown several benefits. This digital design allows for several iterations of a concept to be produced, tried onto the patient, and assessed for potential pitfalls before commencing production of the final appliance. Using analog methods means that any mistakes are costly both in time and materials. For example, the bar you can see on the image in the left there was laser welded directly on the working model, but the problem was that when we came to remove the appliance, we found that it had become entrapped by undercut, and therefore we needed to section and resolder the appliance before it could be fitted to the patient. The same patient was designed at a later date using CAD techniques, and undercut areas were far easier to remove in software. In the right-hand example, the digital bar has been designed with custom retention caps for cups for magnetic keepers, eliminating the use of dental acrylic from the design and instead employing only a small amount of light-curing composite material. Acrylic components are prone to embrittle and fracture after long-term use, so their elimination greatly reduces the need for maintenance of the framework further down the line. While the design shown up to this point used implants in the superior orbital rim to support orbital and intraoral prostheses, a similar concept can be employed to support nasal and oral prostheses. These designs make use of zygomatic implants, and these typically range from 30 to 60 millimeters in length, and they're supported by both the hard, strong bone of the zygoma and the thinner piriform aperture, and they provide a very stable platform for reconstruction of the mid-face region. Finally, I would like to say that while a prosthesis and obturator will never perfectly restore a patient's natural anatomy, they do go a long way to giving a patient back their dignity. Several of these patients that we've treated were, at the time of surgery, given a very short amount of time to live, but actually went on to lead quite long and active lives post-surgery. So it is very easy on times to write something off as being a case that maybe a person who won't survive very long, maybe less should be done, but that is never the case. We always try to rehabilitate to the best possible standard that we can at the time. And like I say, I would like to extend a huge debt of gratitude to the patients who I've been able to show in these slides today. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this work, and that's who it's all about at the end of the day. So, diolch yn fawr, muchas gracias, and thank you very much for listening.
Bueno, para clarificar, que no sé si quedó completamente claro, en la última diapositiva que han presentado, que había 3 imágenes, ellos habían hecho un poco la prótesis, el de aquí habían hecho la prótesis de nariz, el de ahí habían hecho la prótesis del ojo, y en la última imagen también. O sea, ellos hacen también prótesis hechas con silicona y las pintan y tienen una parte como más artística y otra parte como más de 3D. Absolutamente impresionante lo que hacen. Thank you very much, amazing presentations. And now we are going to go with Nieves. Nieves, doctora Nieves Cubo Mateo, es una ingeniera española, pionera en impresión 3D de tejidos. Tenemos la grandísima suerte de tenerla en Madrid, es profesora en la Universidad de Nebrija. Y Nieves fue nada más y nada menos la primera profesional en el mundo en crear piel humana funcional con impresión 3D. Y además desarrolló una impresora de bajo costo para generar tejidos humanos implantables. Bueno, además pues tiene pues aquí un currículum de vértigo, ¿no? Lleva el grado de bioingeniería en la universidad, ha colaborado con la Agencia Espacial Europea. Bueno, pues toda la magia que hace ella nos la va a presentar ahora. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros.
Buenas tardes. ¿Se escucháis? Ahora sí. Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por venir y participar en este evento. Gracias a los organizadores por darnos la oportunidad de compartir con todos un poquito más de la labor que estamos llevando a cabo. Hasta el momento hemos oído hablar un montón de impresión 3D, especialmente de prótesis dedicadas a la medicina. No voy a entrar mucho más a hablar de la tecnología porque creo que ya ha quedado patente la utilidad y la fuerza que ha tomado en este campo en los últimos años. Hemos visto aplicaciones de prótesis metálicas, en guías quirúrgicas y en procesos que incluso, aunque no vayan dentro del paciente, van a ayudar a que los médicos puedan tener una mejor colaboración, una mejor comunicación con los pacientes y una planificación quirúrgica mucho más eficiente. No es lo mismo tener que modelar esas placas metálicas que veíamos en la propia cara que en un modelo que tengo encima de la mesa. Entonces, yo os invito a soñar y a ir un pasito más adelante. Hasta ahora hemos hecho prótesis funcionales que me reemplazan una parte del cuerpo que se ha visto dañada por un accidente, una enfermedad, un tumor que he tenido que reseccionar. ¿Seríamos capaces de conseguir, en vez de ese reemplazo, una regeneración? En lugar de tener una prótesis para siempre o hasta que nos tengan que introducir otra, como hemos visto en los últimos casos, porque no deja de ser algo artificial, externo al cuerpo y que antes o después a veces nos da problemas, pero que no se le puede quitar mérito, o sea, es lo que estamos ahora mismo fundamentados y lo que está haciendo que muchas personas puedan continuar una vida normal. Entonces nosotros intentamos soñar y llegar a ese punto en el que vamos a tener prótesis, pero van a ser temporales. Vamos a intentar poner un material que sea compatible con el cuerpo, que las células les guste, que no se quejen demasiado y que quieran poco a poco ir degradando y regenerando el tejido original. Y eso, lo tenemos aquí marcado en rojo, es lo que se intenta hacer con los scaffolds. Scaffold, andamio, es un soporte temporal para que las células puedan ir poco a poco recubriéndolo y regenerando un tejido. ¿Qué sucede? Si nosotros nos hacemos una herida pequeñita, no le damos mucha importancia porque sabemos que nuestro cuerpo, nuestras células, son capaces de cerrarlo, son capaces de hacer esa regeneración. Pero si vamos a un defecto más grande, crítico, como los que se han mostrado en los pacientes anteriores, nuestro cuerpo llega hasta donde puede. Entonces tenemos que darle un soporte, una ayuda. Si introducimos estos materiales de soporte, esos scaffolds, sin ningún tipo de célula, la limitación que vamos a tener es que ellas van a entrar con mucha energía, con muchas ganas, van a empezar a comerse ese material y poco a poco van a dejar de comunicarse entre ellas, no van a ser capaces de cubrir toda la extensión que hay que curar. Entonces, lo ideal sería darles una ayuda e introducir células incluso dentro del scaffold. La impresión 3D permite una medicina personalizada, como hemos visto antes, porque partimos directamente de modelos del propio paciente. Gracias a una imagen médica, una reconstrucción tridimensional, podemos generar esos modelos. Vayamos un paso más allá. Cojamos las células del paciente, crezcámoslas en el laboratorio e introduzcámoslas en las prótesis. Es un paso más allá en la medicina personalizada que nos va a ayudar a reducir un poquito más ese posible rechazo que se puede dar cuando ponemos algo externo o ajeno a nuestro cuerpo. Así que voy a presentaros el bioprinting, la bioimpresión. Si en una impresora 3D metemos materiales que podemos fundir, modelar capa a capa, en bioprinting vamos a hacer eso, pero como decíamos antes, vamos a incluir el componente bio, las células. Vamos a trabajar con componentes orgánicos que permitan al cuerpo, digamos, llevarse mejor con eso que le estamos introduciendo dentro. Aquí he traído un ejemplo, no sé si se podría reproducir el vídeo, Miguel. ¿Sí? Para que veáis un poco cómo sería, si en algún momento habéis visto una impresora 3D, funciona exactamente igual, pero tenemos que tener en mente que lo que hay ahí dentro son células que están vivas. Yo como ingeniera industrial era muy feliz cuando hacía un diseño, hacía una simulación, mis cálculos de ingeniero, y eso quedaba como yo quería. Este es un campo que me apasiona, pero he de decir que en el momento en el que metí las células, todo fue a pique. Ya esos cálculos, todo lo que nosotros teníamos en mente, empieza a ser variable, porque las células son entes vivos. Y un día nublado como hoy, ellas lo saben, lo sienten. Da igual que estén en un incubador con presión, con una luz artificial, ellas lo sienten. Entonces, hay días en los que trabajan de una forma y hay días que trabajan de otra. Si nos vamos de vacaciones y abrimos menos las incubadoras, también lo sienten por los cambios de presiones, de CO2, de todo. Entonces, no tenemos solo impresión 3D, sino que es 4D. Evoluciona con el tiempo. Y además estamos poniendo materiales que las células se están comiendo. Entonces, esa reconstrucción tridimensional que hacemos va a ir cambiando, va a ir evolucionando con ellas. Y todo eso, como os podéis imaginar, supone un gran reto. Entonces, el sueño, porque ahora mismo es una tecnología que, en contraste con las anteriores, todavía está en investigación, hay algunos casos ya clínicos, se ha demostrado que realmente puede llegar a evitar tener que esperar mucho tiempo para recibir ciertos trasplantes, porque podemos generar esos tejidos, esos órganos directamente en clínica, como decíamos antes, con las células del paciente, pero es algo que vamos a ver en el largo plazo. Hace 10 años yo decía, en una década lo tenemos resuelto, eso está evolucionando todo a una velocidad, ahora voy a decirlo con más calma. Creo que vamos a llegar, creo que estamos en el buen camino, pero todavía falta camino por recorrer. Como decíamos, trabajamos con andamios, con escafos, que se han utilizado ya desde los años 50 en ingeniería de tejidos para regenerar partes del cuerpo que se han visto dañadas. ¿Qué sucede? La homología con esto podría ser una esponja. Pensad en un material que sea muy poroso, en el que yo pueda poner dentro un líquido en el que estén suspendidas las células. Si yo cojo esa esponja, lo único que puedo hacer es que un líquido pase a través. Le puedo inyectar una sustancia. Pero si lo que quiero regenerar son tejidos que tienen este aspecto, estos dibujos que veis aquí, que es un corte histológico de diferentes tejidos, no podría hacerlo así. ¿De acuerdo? Yo tendría algo que sea homogéneo. No podría ir a un nivel de resolución de células y conseguir estas estructuras tan complicadas. Y entonces, cuando los ingenieros biomédicos, clínicos, estaban trabajando en estos problemas, dijeron, si tan solo existiera una máquina que nos permitiera dibujar capa por capa y poner con diferentes materiales y colores estas estructuras, y la impresión 3D llegó. Y no solo llegó, sino que además se democratizó. Pudimos tener acceso a ella en colegios, en hospitales, en centros que ya no solo eran industriales. Pasó a ser una tecnología más a nuestro alcance y algo que nos permitía crear máquinas con bajo coste. La impresora 3D automatiza esa generación que en muchos de los casos ya venía haciéndose a mano, pero lo estandariza y nos permite tener un control sobre el proceso de fabricación. Una bioimpresora es algo como lo que pueden observar aquí en las diapositivas. Las tenemos desde 20.000, 30.000 euros hasta 300.000, medio millón, millón y medio. ¿Vale? La diferencia principal es como las que tenemos en industria o las que podemos llegar incluso a tener en casa. Algunas son do it yourself, tienen menos soporte técnico, pero para nosotros son más entretenidas porque podemos meterle sensores, cambiar todo lo que queramos. Y luego las tenemos más industriales que dan un soporte mayor, soporte técnico sobre todo, y en teoría tienen una mayor resolución. Con estas máquinas, ¿qué hacemos? Cogemos células, cogemos material orgánico que se lleve bien con ellas y lo intentamos juntar todo. La bioimpresión es una tecnología más de fabricación, no es la única que existe para generar tejidos. Y en el futuro vamos a ver cómo más tecnologías similares a ella se van a ir combinando para dar lugar a lo que vamos a ir necesitando para generar reemplazos que se van a ir degradando y regenerando lo que ha sido dañado en el cuerpo. Pasaría horas hablando de este tema porque realmente es algo que me apasiona, pero como no puedo, al menos os voy a enseñar un caso. Esta es una de las impresoras que nosotros tenemos en el laboratorio y en sí misma es una cabina como las que usamos para trabajar con células humanas. Tiene su esterilización, su filtro SEPA, flujo de aire para que no entre ningún patógeno dentro, nos permite generar estructuras en condiciones sanitarias. Entonces, os voy a hacer una petición desde aquí. Si veis esto en las noticias, si veis modelos similares en los que directamente tengo un corazón que sale de la máquina y empieza a palpitar, o cualquier órgano funcional, y decimos funcional porque ya está funcionando, os pido que seáis escépticos, muy escépticos. Porque cuando cogemos las células del cuerpo, cogemos las células, las resuspendemos en un líquido y están perdidas. Están flotando en un medio diciendo, ¿qué hago aquí? Si yo estaba en el cuerpo haciendo una función. ¿Cómo me he visto en medio de este material que no sé ni lo que es, no sé si todavía si me gusta? Y mi vecina de al lado, ¿dónde estaba? ¿De acuerdo? Entonces, están totalmente perdidos. Entonces, es imposible que realicen su función. ¿De acuerdo? Cuando tenemos estas máquinas, lo que vamos a hacer es coger las células, ponerlas en un biomaterial, hacer un constructo celularizado y dejar que madure. Y en ese proceso de maduración, si hemos elegido correctamente los materiales, si tenemos los estímulos que hacen falta, al igual que cuando nosotros crecemos desde un embrión, pues entonces sí vamos a conseguir esa regeneración de los tejidos. Así que no es tan sexy como un corazón que ya está palpitando según sale de la máquina, pero la realidad es esta. Estos son los constructos que se están haciendo a día de hoy para conseguir regenerar córnea, piel, hueso, cartílago. Estamos ya introduciendo también en páncreas, en riñón. Entonces, este es el tipo de estructuras que realmente se están construyendo, ¿de acuerdo? Así que, por favor, si veis que de repente sale un órgano funcionando ya de una máquina, dudad, ¿de acuerdo? Porque al final también es algo que nos afecta mucho en el campo. Cuando estos constructos son madurados, es decir, los ponemos a hacer deporte como en el gimnasio, les dejamos en las condiciones en las que después van a estar trabajando para que puedan ir evolucionando, cogiendo fuerza y empezando ya a degradar ese scaffold que decíamos, esa prótesis que era temporal. Cuando ya tengan la fuerza suficiente, entonces estaremos hablando de que hemos hecho un tejido, un órgano que es funcional. Y ahí sí podremos ir ya a instaurarlo dentro del paciente. ¿Qué aplicaciones pueden tener los constructos celularizados que mostraba anteriormente? Pues principalmente tres. Puedo introducirlos en el paciente y provocar esa regeneración en vez de reemplazo. Soñando, sería ideal que en lugar de tener algo artificial dentro del cuerpo, pudiera integrarse y crecer ya con nosotros. Imaginen en el caso de los niños, en el que tengo que hacer operaciones de forma continua y tener procesos de ampliación de prótesis a lo largo del tiempo de crecimiento, poner algo que se integre con el cuerpo y se acabó. Y si el niño crece, la prótesis crece, porque ya no hay prótesis. Volvemos a tener tejido humano. Entonces ese sería el primer caso de aplicación. Después, si he conseguido hacer un órgano que es similar al que tenía en el paciente con sus propias células, ¿por qué no utilizarlo en el laboratorio para nuevos fármacos, terapias, para probar directamente sobre estos modelos en lugar de en animales, que pueden tener un comportamiento muy diferente y que además a nivel ético es mucho más sencillo? Y por último, si se pueden hacer tejidos humanos, por ejemplo, la piel humana, ¿por qué no hacer otro tipo de materiales como piel vacuna? Utilizarlo en diseño de moda, en otros tipos de aplicaciones. Actualmente es algo que se hace, lo que pasa es que es mucho más caro mantener a las células en el laboratorio que a los animales. Entonces es algo en lo que se está trabajando para bajar el coste tanto de mantenimiento como de producción, para que eso sí pueda ser una realidad en el futuro. Materiales ex vivo también se están produciendo proteínas para hacer carne, para hacer filete, para hacer comida, pero partiendo incluso de material generado por bacterias. Ahí ya nos meteríamos en organismos modificados genéticamente, puede haber controversias, así que yo no me embarro ahí, pero que sepáis que también es una de las aplicaciones en las que se está trabajando. Y obviamente si quiero simular lo que estaría pasando dentro de un ser humano, tendría que ir a gran escala, pero eso es muy costoso a nivel de tiempo, de cantidad de células que se necesitan. Así que ahora mismo hacemos modelos en miniatura para poder testar nuestros conceptos, nuestras hipótesis, los fármacos. Y lo que hacemos es intentar ir un pasito más allá y replicar tantos sistemas de cuerpo como nos sea posible. Porque puede que mi fármaco esté afectando perfectamente al área de interés, a mi diana farmacéutica, pero que cuando libera una sustancia tenga efectos secundarios en otro sistema. Entonces, ahora mismo también se está trabajando en unas nuevas tecnologías que son órgano on a chip, tissue on a chip, system on a chip, que básicamente es que hacemos miniaturas de diferentes sistemas del cuerpo y los ponemos en interacción entre ellos, y cada una de esas miniaturas puede ser impresa. Podemos hacer organoides, pequeños órganos en miniatura que tienen las propiedades de los órganos grandes. ¿Qué ventajas tenemos con esta tecnología frente a la fabricación que se estaba haciendo de manera clásica o frente a los métodos que tenemos ahora mismo para afrontar este tipo de problemas en la clínica? Estamos trabajando a medida, células del paciente, intentamos disminuir el rechazo, como decíamos, y buscar regeneración en lugar de reemplazo. Si tengo un paciente que además tenía un problema con las células, porque ha perdido el tejido por una enfermedad, puedo incluso plantearme trabajar primero con esas células dañadas, introducir terapias genéticas, terapias avanzadas, hacer una cura y volver a generar el tejido ya con células sanas. En principio podría ser un tratamiento más rápido frente a las largas esperas que tenemos ahora mismo para trasplante. Tenemos la suerte de estar en el país que más número de donantes tiene y eso es algo que salva vidas todos los días. Entonces, es una tecnología que estamos enfocando ahora mismo para procesos en los que todavía no se están dando solución o necesitamos que sea rápido, son casos en los que no se aceptan tejidos de otros pacientes fácilmente. Para los modelos in vitro, en lo que sería dentro del laboratorio, sobre todo a nivel ético, como método alternativo a la experimentación animal, ahora que tenemos la ley de sacrificio cero, pues también está siendo un gran motivo. Y nos va a permitir comparar. Si yo tengo un tumor de un paciente, lo que a nosotros nos llega normalmente al laboratorio es una muestra de 2 por 2 centímetros. Eso con mucha suerte. Suerte para nosotros, para el paciente no, porque implica que el tumor era muy grande. Pero con eso yo no puedo probar diferentes terapias, diferentes fármacos y tener una estadística significativa para decir este tratamiento va a funcionar bien con mi paciente. Entonces, ¿qué hacemos? Cojo esas células y al igual que puedo hacer hueso, pues puedo hacer un sarcoma con células cancerígenas. Y lo que intentamos es replicar y tener una gran cantidad de pequeños tumores sobre los que probar estas terapias y fármacos. Esa es una de las líneas que tenemos actualmente en colaboración con 2 hospitales diferentes para tratar 2 tipos de cáncer que actualmente tienen bastante impacto. Y materiales ex vivo, pues una vez más, avances para el campo. ¿Cuáles son los retos a superar? Porque esto suena muy bien, pero si pudiéramos hacerlo ya tendríamos la aplicación en todas partes. Entonces, actualmente podemos hacer tejidos muy pequeñitos porque mantener a las células con vida es muy costoso y además requiere nutrientes, oxígeno y todo lo que necesitan para sobrevivir. Y podemos hacer estos pequeños ladrillitos y después darles a todos su conexión de nutrientes y de oxígeno. Pero todavía no somos capaces de construirlo en grande e imprimir todos los vasos sanguíneos, los conductos que necesitan para poder sobrevivir. Entonces, ese escalado desde los constructos de laboratorio de 2 centímetros hasta el tamaño real, que diríamos de clínica, es lo que ahora mismo está siendo un tapón, porque además la parte de la biología la conocemos experimentalmente, sabemos que si no tenemos suficientes células, cogemos de otro sitio y las diferenciamos, pero no sabemos por qué se diferencian, no sabemos por qué a veces sí, a veces no. Ahora está diluviando y seguramente las células dirían, pues mira, hoy no me voy a convertir en la misma célula que me convertí ayer. Así que espérate a mañana a ver qué tiempo hace y hablamos. ¿Vale? Entonces, realmente tenemos muchas cosas que aprender en el camino para que esto funcione. Por supuesto, tenemos que pasar regulación, al igual que con las prótesis, tenemos que ir a agencias de medicamentos y productos sanitarios e incluso si queremos tenerlo como un método alternativo a la experimentación animal, también necesitamos una normativa que avale que lo que estamos haciendo al menos se comporta igual que esos animalitos para que podamos certificar los productos. Nuestra experiencia, anteriormente introducía a Alba que había creado una impresora de piel humana de bajo coste y esto lo hice como estudiante de grado en Ingeniería Electrónica Industrial y Automática en la Carlos III, dentro de un grupo de investigación liderado por el CIEMAT y por el Instituto de Investigación de Gregorio Marañón. En este lo que conseguíamos era obtener material directamente del paciente para que sea todavía más compatible, células, y con las máquinas crear un constructo celularizado que finalmente se convertía en piel y que se podía poner en el paciente. De hecho, sí que podíamos ponerlo en el paciente al día siguiente. Con que pasara toda la noche las células acomodándose al medio, el material es tan resistente y tan bueno para ellas y proviene de la misma persona que no tienen problema en regenerar el tejido. Conseguimos ir in vivo en animales, conseguimos demostrar que funcionaba y finalmente se movió hacia clínica y está ahora mismo en estadios. Hay otra universidad actualmente que por fin ha conseguido toda la aprobación y llevarlo hasta clínica. Entonces siempre hemos intentado trabajar en una metodología utilizando materiales de nuestro propio cuerpo, células de los pacientes, e intentar que todo sea lo más natural posible. Además, a mí me gusta trabajar en open source, intentando que llegue a todas partes posibles para que realmente haya una divulgación. Y tenemos otros casos. Os invito a que busquéis en internet, que nos sigáis en redes sociales, que he dejado después links para que conozcáis un poco más. Pero actualmente estamos trabajando en hueso, en cartílago, en modelos de cáncer de colon, de páncreas, en modelos de cáncer de hueso. Conseguimos que las células sobrevivan, conseguimos que se coman ese material temporal que las ponemos, estudiamos la geometría que les gusta, la que no les gusta, metemos inteligencia artificial para conseguir una mejor segmentación con las imágenes clínicas que nos dan los pacientes, conseguimos trabajar con la vasculatura, hacer esos canales para intentar que el oxígeno y los nutrientes les lleguen a todos. Y demostramos, mediante análisis genéticos, mediante todos esos análisis masivos de datos biológicos que nos llegan de los pacientes, que los constructos que hacemos en los laboratorios realmente se comportan igual que los que tiene el paciente de forma original. Somos un grupo muy multidisciplinar. Tenemos ingeniero naval, aeroespacial, informático, industrial, actualmente un bioingeniero, el primero que ha entrado en el grupo. Creo que realmente para llevar a cabo este tipo de investigaciones, la multidisciplinaridad, el que haya enfoques de distintos puntos, el ser capaces de entender las necesidades de clínica, estar dentro de los hospitales, ver lo que hay que hacer realmente, es fundamental. Nosotros, como venimos de una universidad, nos centramos en la formación de esas futuras generaciones que van a ser las que lleven a cabo esta labor. Y para nosotros es un aspecto clave indicarles que realmente tienen que colaborar en equipo y que ninguno de ellos solo lo va a poder conseguir y sacar adelante. Os invito a que nos sigáis en redes sociales, tenemos muchos proyectos interesantes también de bioeconomía, economía circular. Menciono porque previamente creo que Fabián también comentó que esta temática era de interés. Y trabajamos en la reingeniería porque queremos ir a misiones exploratorias de larga distancia y ver cómo realmente esa economía circular, que aquí nos gustaría tener, pero que si no tenemos al 100% tampoco pasa nada, pero allí es fundamental porque nos vamos con lo que llevamos puesto y ya. Y o crecemos algo y lo sacamos de nuestro pelo, de nuestras uñas, de lo que podamos crecer, o lo tenemos un poco crudo. Todas esas tecnologías que están desarrollando se aplican en la Tierra, ¿de acuerdo? Es algo fundamental que recordemos que toda la investigación que se lleva al espacio en áreas aisladas con pocos recursos son realmente fundamentales en la Tierra porque nos permiten reducir los materiales, mejorar las condiciones del agua, del oxígeno, etc. Espero que os haya resultado interesante y quedamos atentos a cualquier pregunta que podáis tener. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, estupenda Nieves Cubo, siempre, todas tus presentaciones son súper didácticas y qué bien explicas y qué bien presentas y qué bien todo, ¿no? Bueno, pues ya tenemos las presentaciones de todos los ponentes hechas y vamos a pasar a la ronda de preguntas. Tenemos 11 minutos para preguntas, así que no sé si alguien quiere lanzarse. Alguna cuestión que os haya surgido, si no queréis hacerla en inglés, la podéis decir en español y la traducimos. Animaros, no os dé vergüenza, que ha habido mucha información aquí, no me creo que no haya ninguna pregunta. Bueno, yo tengo varias preguntas. Vamos a empezar, por ejemplo, pues vamos a empezar con Amy, ¿vale? We are going to start with a few questions, round of questions now. We have around 10 minutes. So, as one of the main leaders in the world in 3D printing, we have been very, very impressed with all the setup that you have. You have literally 70 engineers working for you and amazing equipment. I guess one of the big questions here is where does the money come from and how is this funded? Yeah? Thank you.
think this is turned on. Yes, thank you. So, where does the money come from? That is always the question that I'm asked. When the Mayo brothers wanted to start engineering in 1915 and bring that in-house, they funded it with institutional funds. So procedures would bring in money, and that money would get separated out into various departments, and the Division of Engineering became one of those departments that would receive an annual budget. So we are responsible for managing a multi-million-dollar budget between the 9 managers. We have different responsibilities. Where does the money go for space that we have acquired in the hospital? Where does the money go for staffing and benefits? We have a responsibility to manage that budget, but it's institutionally funded. So we don't necessarily bring in revenue unless we patent out our ideas and then license them out to major companies, but that's not the primary value. The primary value, like I mentioned, is that the needs of the patient come first, and so we're supported because we align with the strategic goals of the institution. That said, if we do end up making royalties on funding, on licensing, then that goes back into our royalty account, and we can use that to continue to grow. So the fact that we're not a medical device manufacturer and we're not marketing or selling the devices that we fabricate makes it so that profit is not the bottom line. The bottom line is to try to help the surgeons do what they need to do, the proceduralists do what they need to do. Really anybody at Mayo Clinic could request a device be made, and depending on their actual occupation, we would work on that. So we're institutionally funded. When it comes to reimbursement for anatomic models, we are really at the beginning stages, the first stages. The American Medical Association approved 4 current procedural terminology codes back in 2000, I want to say 19 or 20, and they are temporary codes. They're being used across the United States to see what hospitals are using anatomic models for. What applications? Is it solely trauma? Is it solely oncology? Is it congenital defect reconstruction or things like that? And then once you can prove that the addition of models and guides and implants is actually saving on indirect costs, like number of days in the hospital post-procedure, or revision surgeries, reduction of that, you can show cost savings in the long term. But right now we are looking at temporary CPT codes. We are actively using them. We are actively being reimbursed for anatomic models and guides. I'm not allowed to talk about how much money is for the reimbursement because of cost sharing and legalities around that. But even though they're temporary codes, they are successful.
Excellent. That is very, very good. Well, I think it would be clever as well to continue with the same question, also for you guys. I would add as well, because you have established good collaborations with industry for the developing of your implants. If you could talk a little bit about how you finance the 3D lab and how you established these collaborations with industry.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We when we first started, we didn't print our own models. It wasn't really cost effective to print our own models, and PDR, who I mentioned, and Richard Bibb, they were producing most of the models for the UK back then, because it would cost us, many thousands to buy a 3D printer. Now you can buy a 3D printer for, well, we bought one this week for about 200 quid, 250 euros, so you can buy them very cheaply. But it's not cost effective for us to buy a metal printer. And also, I think when you think about metal printing, it's the housing of the metal printer as well. It's got to be done, because actually titanium powder is explosive, and it's got to be done in a very secure environment.
Yeah.
And then so that you've got the cost, and also finishing. You know, when you print something in metal, it doesn't just come off the printer all shiny and nice. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work of cutting and polishing, as you know. So those don't make it cost effective for us to have a printer. So you need good communication with outside agencies, and we started. Well, when you were with us, we used Renishaw. Which was nice because we could drive there and pick things up. And it's really about those few days. When you're dealing with surgery, it's about those few days. Sometimes, you know, you are getting something within a day before surgery, so it's tight deadlines. If you can go and get something, it's very good.
We used to do it a lot indeed.
We did. We used to go and pick it up. But so it's good. You've got that. You need that relationship with an outside agency that will produce things very quickly for you, and maybe push out the boat, do things really, really quick, and also good quality. You know what you're going to get back each time, and they understand and can interpret your design as well. That you know you're on the same level. Because the last thing you want with your engineers on the other end, if you send them an STL design, for them to say, "Oh, this is not right." Because you've got to go back to the drawing board and redo it. So you need to have that good communication. So I think, and we found a couple of manufacturers in the UK that do that really well, haven't we? Really? And we get a turnaround of about a week or two, week and a half. So about 10 days we can design a plate and get that back. I mean, really the hardest part for us is to get the surgeons to us to agree the design and sign that off and say, yes, that's what we want. That's the hardest part, actually. So once that's done, then we can send it to the manufacturer and get that back. Cost-wise, we are funded through the NHS, so there's not a budget for us. I know we're in Wales, and everything is paid for at a point of care. I think in England there is a central budget for 3D printed plates. But that's coming to an end soon, and they will have to buy their own plates from their own budgets. But in Wales we buy it from our own budgets. So.
Very good. It's very interesting. Muy interesante ver cómo en cada sitio, en cada hospital, pues se financia como se puede y cada uno tiene sus métodos, ¿no? Thank you very much. Y la última pregunta para Nieves. Bueno, tú eres una profesora que está muy involucrada en la formación de los nuevos bioingenieros, te apasiona la docencia y tienes mucha relación con estudiantes que están estudiando ingeniería biomédica. Aparte de la formación técnica que les das como ingenieros, ¿qué es lo que crees que falta o que es importante inculcarles para que el día de mañana estén, bueno, pues que se puedan desenvolver bien en un hospital o que se puedan desenvolver bien en una empresa?
Vale, pues principalmente creo que la labor que hay que realizar para que eso sea posible no es en la educación de estos estudiantes, sino más bien en las infraestructuras. A nivel, yo hice ingeniería industrial y quería trabajar dentro de un hospital con la parte de bioimpresión, pero no podía porque era ingeniería industrial. Y de hecho me costó el poder desarrollar las propias investigaciones a nivel clínico y tuve que hacer másters en medio, irme especializando y terminar con un doctorado en farmacia. Soy una ingeniera industrial con un doctorado en farmacia. Puede sonar muy raro, pero si lo que hacemos son tejidos humanos o productos sanitarios, pues al final cae sobre la farmacia. Entonces creo que la mayor restricción ahora mismo, lo que más nos cuesta, que gracias a los últimos avances que parece que se está desbloqueando, es cómo conseguir que un ingeniero que no está per se en clínica, que no es un médico, que no está en ese sector, pueda acceder a puestos en los que realmente esté en contacto con los clínicos, con los doctores, con pacientes, porque tienen que entender el problema. Un ingeniero del automóvil tiene que entender bien cómo es un coche y tiene que estar en contacto con los coches, desmontarlos, trastear. Obviamente no vamos a trastear con un humano así, pero sí necesitamos estar en los hospitales para poder asistir mejor, para entender las necesidades y poder además comprender la jerga médica y estar relacionados. Entonces, desde mi punto de vista, creo que un poquito ese es el camino que tenemos que seguir y que creo que ya se ha comenzado, pero que falta recorrido.
Sí, completamente de acuerdo, desde luego que sí. Bueno, pues yo creo que vamos bien de tiempo, justo a tiempo. Y bueno, nada, simplemente pues concluir, ¿qué puedo decir después de estas presentaciones? Pues que la impresión 3D es una tecnología que está cambiando los paradigmas de la medicina, tanto en temas de planificación virtual como tratamientos de pacientes en cirugías, etcétera. Que el papel del ingeniero lo hemos visto claro en el progreso de la medicina y de la digitalización de la salud, y que poniendo la tecnología al servicio del paciente pues podemos lograr innovaciones tan fantásticas como las que nos han presentado. Concluir con un aplauso para nuestros ponentes. Y bueno, muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, ya se han ido, pero la verdad que han sido presentaciones impresionantes. Hemos dado un paso más, como decíamos al principio, con lo que nos han contado de bioimpresión. Nieves ya introducía la impresión 4D con esa componente emocional justo con las espaciales, así que la verdad que ha sido muy interesante. Continuamos y es un placer presentar a nuestro siguiente invitado, Alejandro Sastre, que es ingeniero de producción en Serveo, entidad a la que agradecemos su apoyo por ser uno de nuestros patrocinadores. Alejandro es ingeniero de materiales y tiene amplia experiencia en el sector sanitario. Viene a presentarnos una innovadora tecnología que trabaja en soluciones orientadas a la mejora de los procesos mediante la fabricación y elementos 3D. Adelante, Alejandro.
Vale, buenos días a todos, mi nombre es Alejandro y vengo de la empresa Serveo, que para los que no nos conozcáis, Serveo es una empresa que nace en el año... Uy, perdonad. Serveo es... Vale. Serveo es una empresa, es una gran empresa con una gran trayectoria que nacimos como Ferrera de Servicios en el año 95 y luego en el año 2022 nos desvinculamos pasando a ser una entidad propia, manteniendo todos los contratos en los que operábamos hasta la fecha. Nosotros nos dedicamos a los servicios de mantenimiento y gestión de grandes infraestructuras, pero lo que más nos caracteriza, más que lo que hacemos, es el cómo lo hacemos, que es que nosotros llevamos en nuestro ADN la innovación por delante. Y tanto es así que hemos creado lo que son los Expert Factory, que son unos grupos de innovación. Vale. Son la Expert Factory, que son unos grupos de innovación con los cuales damos apoyo a todos nuestros servicios y generamos valor dentro de ellos. Yo, en mi caso, estoy dentro de uno de ellos, el equipo de Expert 3D, que es el que vengo hoy a hablaros aquí. Expert 3D es un centro tecnológico de fabricación aditiva en el cual hacemos tanto la parte de ingeniería como la parte de fabricación y diseño y fabricación de todo tipo de piezas para la industria. Nosotros nos introdujimos en los hospitales a través de estos servicios de gestión y de mantenimiento, haciendo todo tipo de piezas, recambios y demás, y luego también haciendo algunas piezas más técnicas de mayor interés, como por ejemplo esta en electromedicina, que es una pieza de un motor de Striker, de una sierra de Striker, y que bueno, pues como ya sabéis, algunas de estas piezas no se venden sueltas en el mercado y esto pues es una opción para no tener que comprar el dispositivo entero. Aparte de todo esto, nosotros no solo diseñamos y fabricamos, sino que mejoramos las piezas. Lo que intentamos hacer es, a través de cálculos estructurales, optimización topológica, hacer que estas piezas sean más resistentes y poder alargar la vida útil en servicio. Incluso, algunas veces, poder hacer que sean más fáciles de reparar y de separar para luego poder ser recicladas. Tanto es así que nos hemos metido de lleno en algunos proyectos de sostenibilidad, como estos de aquí, en los que hemos fabricado a partir de desechos de residuos orgánicos, pues todo tipo de piezas para mobiliario, como son este que veis aquí en naranja, que es un frutero hecho a partir de cáscara de naranja, este que podemos ver aquí, que es un jarrón hecho a partir de caucho reciclado, y luego algunas otras piezas muy técnicas, como esta que vemos aquí, que es una pieza hecha para Airbus con sus propios desechos de fibra de carbono que producen en su planta. Y bueno, para que veáis un poco la importancia de la innovación en estos contratos, nosotros ya hay algunos centros que están valorando esto, hasta tal punto que lo han incluido en sus criterios para la adjudicación del contrato y adquieren una gran puntuación para tener, por esa posibilidad de tener pues un centro de fabricación adjunto que le dé ese soporte y le fabrique todas esas piezas y le dé pues soluciones personalizadas. Nosotros, como les he dicho antes, venimos de la parte del mantenimiento y poco a poco hemos ido ganando tecnología, ganando en conocimiento, nos certificamos en la ISO 9001 y en la 13485 para poder fabricar todo tipo de productos sanitarios a medida y junto a nuestra larga experiencia, lo que hemos conseguido es poder enfrentar muchos de los retos de la medicina personalizada. Nosotros, como trabajamos, al final es en colaboración con los hospitales. Nuestra idea es siempre que haya ingenieros que trabajan aunados dentro de los hospitales con los médicos para poder darles aportarles toda esa parte técnica de fabricación y diseño y demás, y luego también apoyarnos en nuestro centro para brindarles pues esa capacidad, darles más capacidad de fabricación. Vale. Un caso muy interesante que nos gusta contar es este de aquí, que hicimos con el 12 de octubre, en el que nos pidieron, teníamos como reto el hacer mascarillas personalizadas para neonatos. ¿Por qué? Porque las mascarillas que había actuales, las comerciales, se les sale el aire y para poder ajustárselas pues se les suele poner esparadrapo y se les ajusta. El ajuste no es perfecto y se le acaba quedando señales en la carita del bebé. Entonces, uno de los retos era poder fabricarlo. Entonces, a la conclusión a la que llegamos era a la que íbamos ellos en el hospital se iban a encargar de la parte del escaneado 3D de la pieza, de la cara del bebé, para sacar lo que es la malla, y con eso nos lo íbamos a llevar al centro tecnológico y diseñar lo que es la mascarilla y fabricarla. Problema, que la mascarilla no éramos capaces, y ellos también era uno de los problemas que tenían, no eran capaces de fabricarla directamente en impresión 3D. Pues por tema de las limitaciones que tiene la tecnología y también tema de la limitación de los materiales para poder llegar a hacer estas mascarillas. Entonces la solución a la que llegamos es hacer una fabricación por partes. Primero imprimimos un molde de inyección, como ese que veis ahí, que se imprime con resina, y después inyectamos una silicona biocompatible y la dejamos curar. Otro de los grandes retos que planteaba este proyecto eran los tiempos. Eran los tiempos de fabricación, que nosotros inicialmente tardábamos en torno a una semana desde que generamos la malla del bebé hasta que se lo entregamos al hospital. Y poco a poco fuimos optimizando estos procesos, también en colaboración con el hospital, y hemos llegado a que a día de hoy, cuando Antonio, que es el ingeniero que trabaja allí, que ha llevado este proyecto junto con nosotros, nos da la malla, en un día, al día siguiente, somos capaces de tener la mascarilla fabricada y entregársela en el hospital. Vale. Entonces, aparte de todo este tipo de aplicaciones, también hacemos segmentación de la imagen, producimos una imagen virtual para la operación y somos capaces de también llevar esa forma virtual a algo real, algo tangible, por medio de los biomodelos. Somos capaces pues tanto de fabricar biomodelos más simples hasta los más complejos, con todo tipo de colores, todo tipo de texturas y de sores, para recrear estas estructuras anatómicas. En este vídeo os he dejado la fabricación de un corazón, la recreación de un biomodelo de un corazón, para poder introducir un stent y poder ver cómo encajaría y demás en el proceso. Y bueno, como también hemos conseguido la certificación, llegamos hasta la clase 2A, pues también en la parte clínica fabricamos todo tipo de guías de corte. Y bueno, ahora para terminar os voy a dejar un vídeo explicativo en el cual de un caso que hicimos con el Hospital Universitario San Cecilio de Granada, y que bueno, se llegó a una solución muy chula y quiero que la veáis porque en el vídeo la verdad es que te deja atónito.
Pilar se le diagnosticó un tumor en el riñón derecho, en el polo superior del riñón derecho, y luego un tumor en la vía urinaria superior del riñón izquierdo. La planificación consistió en extirpar el tumor del riñón derecho para conservar ese riñón, puesto que la cirugía del riñón izquierdo consistía en hacer una extirpación completa tanto del riñón como del uréter, lo que se conoce como nefroureterectomía.
Yo fui a la médico de cabecera, al médico, que era un muchacho en verano, era un sustituto, y me vio las plaquetas un poquito bajas, pero un poquito. Me mandó al hematólogo, el hematólogo ya me pidió una serie de pruebas, y bueno, cuando vieron en la ecografía que aparecían las dos cosas que había. Y entonces eso fue a finales de enero.
Gracias a la impresión 3D pudimos hacer una planificación correcta de la cirugía antes del tratamiento quirúrgico, porque nos permite ver la localización exacta del tumor.
Nosotros, a través de las distintas técnicas de imagen, fundamentalmente TAC y resonancia magnética, obtenemos imágenes del paciente, de la patología que tiene. Con esas imágenes hacemos los modelos de impresión 3D. Contamos con un laboratorio de impresión 3D aproximadamente 1 año y medio. En este laboratorio nosotros hacemos modelos más sencillos para ayudar a nuestros pacientes y a los cirujanos, traumatólogos, cirujanos, urólogos, etc. Tenemos dos convenios con otras entidades. Un convenio con la universidad para hacer algunos modelos especiales de algunas patologías concretas. También tenemos un convenio con una empresa privada, con Serveo, con la cual colaboramos para hacer otras impresiones que no tenemos ahora mismo la capacidad autónoma.
A través del jefe de radiología del hospital, él va seleccionando un poco los casos que sean de mayor complejidad y en este caso en concreto, siendo el primero de tejido blando que se hace en este hospital, se apoya en nosotros, ya que tenemos la tecnología disponible para ello. Primero, a través del DICOM o del TAC que se le hace a la paciente, hicimos la recreación 3D, lo analizó el jefe de radiología, nos dio el visto bueno y aún así nos pidió la posibilidad de imprimirlo. Se llegó a la impresión total a escala real y fue el soporte para la intervención.
Esta es la reproducción en 3D de los 2 riñones de Pilar, junto con la vena cava, que es la que está en azul, y la arteria aorta, que es la que está dibujada en rojo. Y este modelo pues te da esa utilidad de que nos permite pues tener una imagen real de la cirugía. Las ventajas del modelo y de este tipo de cirugía es que se consigue conservar el riñón, en este caso el riñón derecho, y Pilar pues puede tener llevar una vida prácticamente normal, con una función renal prácticamente normal, la que tendría cualquier persona que tiene dos riñones, y le evita de complicaciones importantes como puede ser la diálisis, en los casos en los que los pacientes pues se quedan sin ninguno de los dos riñones.
Esa es la indicación que realmente creo yo que el futuro de esta técnica de impresión en 3D. Tumores intrarrenales, tumores muy en contacto con grandes vasos renales y que nos interesa hacer cirugía conservadora de nefrones.
Me alegro haber caído en estas manos desde las primeras pruebas diagnósticas más importantes hasta el bienhechor que lo ha hecho conmigo, vamos, estupendamente. Y bueno, yo también que he hecho todo lo posible para que todo fuera bien. Y ya está. Y muestra la bendita.
Bueno, ya para terminar me gustaría despedirme invitándoos a unas jornadas que hacemos en Cerveo de innovación en salud, en las que pues contamos muchos más casos, todo lo que hacemos y además pues os damos la posibilidad de que visitéis nuestro centro tecnológico y veáis las cosas ahí físicas, tangibles, y bueno, es una experiencia que todo el mundo que va pues le encanta, así que nada. El próximo jueves 26 estáis todos invitados. Si queréis venir o podéis venir, pues nada, podéis contactar conmigo o directamente con Alfonso Quiroga, que seguro que le conocéis mucho más que a mí. Así que nada, un placer estar aquí y espero que os haya gustado.